Hey Quilty friends, in today's video I'm going to show you how to make the twin star quilt block. Now it's block 9 of my mystery block of the month series, and if you don't know what that is, I'll put a link down below so you can go and check it out. It's actually made the same way that we made the double pinwheel quilt block. Let me show you how. To make the twin star block you're going to need 4 different fabrics, and I've got the diagram here with the legend telling you exactly how to cut your fabrics. For example, A, we need to cut 2 pieces at 5 inches by 5 inches, and you can find a copy of this over on my website. I'll put a link down below, or you might just want to take a screenshot of the video right now. So then what I did was, for the different sizes, I actually put them into piles. So I've got my 2 5 by 5 pieces here and so on in the different sizes, just to make the next step a bit easier. So the first thing we're going to do is take both of our A pieces and cut them in half on the diagonal. So that means from corner to corner. If you find it easier, you could draw a line first, but I'm just going to take my ruler and I'm going to line it up at the top, at the very top corner, and then line it up at the bottom. And then I do find it does move around, so then I just check again that it's still lined up nicely at the top and at the bottom, and then I'll cut. And I'll repeat that for my second piece. And if you're using directional fabric, you might want to make sure you're cutting them in the same direction. Then I'm going to take my B and F piece, and this time we're cutting them on the diagonal on both sides, cutting them into 4 pieces. So just to save a bit of time, I'm going to place them on top of each other. So if this was a pattern fabric, the right side would be facing up right now. And I'm just going to cut them together to save a bit of time. So I'm just going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to line up my ruler on the top corner at the top and the bottom, and then I will check a couple of times and cut. And I want them to just stay exactly how they are. So I'm lifting up my ruler carefully. And I'm just going to rotate my mat around so I can do it again. If you don't have a rotating mat, just turn your mat around carefully. And then again from corner to corner. Checking it is lined up at the top and the bottom, and just checking these 2 pieces haven't moved at all. Okay. Then what I did was I put both the pieces in piles of my F fabric and my B fabric, and I've put the 2 cut sides next to each other, creating this bigger triangle, and this is how we want to sew them together. So I'm going to take a piece from each pile and place them right sides together, and we want to sew along this edge. So I just like to pop a pin in so I know that it's down this side that I want to sew, and I'll do that for all 4 pieces. And we don't have to do it perfectly, it's just so we know what side, and when we get to the piece then we can fix it up. Okay, now let's sew those together. So now we want to sew along this edge where we put the pin in. I've got my 1/4 inch foot on because we need a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I'm stitching at stitch length 2. Now because of these points, sometimes your sewing machine does like to eat that fabric. So you could start on this side because it's a bit chunkier, or you could start with a bit of scrap fabric first and get a run up before you start sewing on your fabric. But I'm just going to turn mine over, line up these edges here, and pop my pin back in and sew. I'm just going to come off right off the edge and then take my next piece. And then sew, and I'll repeat that until I've sewn all 4 sets together. Cutting my thread and then just trimming the thread where it's joined together with our chain stitches, being careful not to cut our fabric. So now we're just going to set our stitches, and that just means we're going to press our stitches, and like the name suggests, it just helps the stitches set into the fabric, making them stronger and our block lay flatter. Then what I'm going to do is open it up and press towards the darker fabric. So just giving it a finger press so it's all sitting nicely, and pressing. And repeating that for all 4 pieces. So next what we're going to do is sew our A pieces onto this piece, but first I just want to make sure this line here is nice and straight. So I'm just going to take my ruler and place a line on that seam, and then the edge of the ruler along the edge of the piece there, and that one looks pretty good to me, so I don't need to do anything. And I will just check all 4 because it really just helps them be much more accurate and tidy if we just do this little extra step. So I can see I just need to cut a slither off on the top there. Not a lot, but it just helps with our accuracy. So I've made 2 piles, one with the 2 pieces we just sewed together and one with my A pieces, and now we're going to sew them together. So I'm going to take one piece from each pile and face them right sides together. Now our A piece is slightly smaller than the pieces we sewed together, so just make sure it's sitting in the middle, which means you've got about the same extra amounts at the top and the bottom. And then if you'd like to, you can just turn it over to make sure that when we sew over the seam it is facing the right way. So when I'm happy that all those edges are lined up nicely, I'll just pop in a pin or 2. It's optional, you might not need to, but I do think pins help with accuracy. So I'm just going to sew along that edge again. I'm just coming right off the edge. I'm not going to cut my thread, and I'm just going to take the next set and do exactly the same. So then I'm going to cut my thread and then trim again where it's joined by the chain. And then let's press. For all 4 pieces, we'll just set the stitches and then press towards our A piece or our larger piece, finger press and press. So now we need to square up all 4 pieces, and I happen to have a 4.5-inch square ruler, which is really handy. All I do is place my diagonal line on my seam, and then I also have a circle there which shows me the exact center of my ruler. So I put that right on my join there on this diagonal seam. So that's sitting right in the middle of my block, and then I just trim. And I've got this handy new rotating mat, which I love. Does make life easier. Now if you didn't have a rotating mat, you'd just carefully turn your mat, which is what I've done in the past, or you just turn your piece and then realign your ruler. Okay, so that's that one done. Now if you don't have a ruler that's exactly 4.5 inches, all you would do is take your ruler, find your diagonal line, place that on top, and then we need to measure half of 4.5 inches because that's the size we need to square them up to. So then you'd be wanting to find 2 inches and 1/4. So actually I'm going to have to turn my ruler around because I'm on the 1/2 inch side, which makes it a bit tricky. So again, finding that diagonal line, and then I'm measuring 2 inches and 1/4. So I want to make sure that's coming up right into that center point. And then we'll just trim this side. We'll turn it around. And we'll do exactly the same on this side. So placing that line on the diagonal, finding 2 inches and 1/4. on that center mark there and trimming. I can also tell that that's correct because my 4.5 inch line is lining up right on the edge there that I just trimmed. So that's perfect. And then I'll repeat that for the other two sides. So I finished squaring up all 4 pieces. Now I've got my diagram back and we're going to place all the pieces so we're matching the diagram. So I'm going to take this first piece and we want the solid piece facing in towards that center square. Okay, and then we place our F pieces in all this, in all the corners. And there we have it. So just check that you are creating the pattern correctly. So like I said, I've got my A fabric here, the solid side coming down to the center, and you can see that it's kind of looks like it's turning around this way. So just do double check because it is easy to accidentally place them wrong and not notice until you've sewn them all together. Just remember, if you've got directional fabric, to make sure you're happy with how it's placed. I mean, we can't do anything about it now in our sewn together pieces, but these big pieces we can. So just check that too. And then we're going to sew our columns together. And then we're going to press them. So what I like to do is just pin them together roughly so I know which side to sew on. So I'll just pin that, open it up and pin that together there. And this just helps me stop getting into a pickle and making sure I do sew them in the right order. So I do that for all the columns and then I'm going to sew them together. So now I'm just going to take out my pins and make sure all the edges are lined up nicely on both sides and along this edge here that we're going to sew. And then I'm just going to be really careful, sorry, we'll pop a pin in just to keep it in place, that when I'm sewing over these seams here that they are sitting in the direction that they're pressed as I come up to them. So I'll sew all my pieces together now that I'd pinned together. Now we need to press, and because we want to nest the seams, we've got to press one column one way, one column the other, and then one column back the other way. So I'll start with this one here and I will just set the stitches, and then I'm going to press these ones up, finger press and press, and then I'll give the whole piece a press. And then I'll do exactly the same for this set, but then press these ones down. And then I'll press these ones up again. So now let's sew them together. So checking our columns are in the right order again, creating our pattern, we're just going to sew them together. So I'll take these two, place them right sides together, and then I'll find the seams. So I want to nest the seams, and that means one seam is pressed and going that way, one seam's pressed and going over this way, and then we want to butt them up together. And then we can open it up and just check that it's creating a nice straight line, and it is. And then when we're happy, we just pop a pin in, then we find the next set of seams and do exactly the same. Then I like to just come to the beginning here and just pop a pin in, making sure these edges are all lined up nicely. Again in the center and at the end. Then I'll sew these together, then I'll come back and then attach the last piece. And when I come up to the nested seams, I just like to make sure that the seams are going to be sewn down in the direction they've been pressed. So just keep an eye on that. Now we're going to do our last press, so I'm just going to set those stitches again, and I'm going to press my seams just all in one direction. If you'd like to, you could press them open, and at this point it really is a personal preference. I'm just going to press mine to my left. And I'm going to press these ones to my right. And I'll give my whole piece a press. And there we have our twin star block. Isn't that cute? So there we have the twin star quilt block. I hope you liked that, and if you did, please hit the like button. It really helps me out. Now, one thing to note is because we are cutting that fabric on the diagonal, we're then sewing on the bias, which does make our fabric a little bit stretchy, so we need to be super careful with it. And if you'd like, you could also spray it with a bit of starch. That does help make it a little bit more sturdy. If you like this video, you might like my double pinwheel quilt block. I'll put the link above. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you in the next video.